there is value in hearing the naysayers because you can prove from those naysayers' points what is a myth and what is actually a fear that can be overcome in entrepreneurship and autonomy. I also think that reaching out to people who have, done bigger things compared to like wherever a person is, like if a person is going from never having had a space to negotiating a lease, talk to someone who's negotiated a lease. If you're talking to someone who has already gone through renegotiating a lease, talk to them about, what they learned, lessons learned from their experience. And I also think that it is definitely a mindset. There is a mindset portion to this to say to yourself, especially in medicine, especially in primary care, if you can go to medical school, you could probably learn a bit about real estate and investing.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mogul MD podcast. Thanks for tuning in and taking control of your financial future. This is a show where we not only motivate and inspire, we give you actionable, real-world experience to help you live life by design. You'll hear journeys and stories from other physicians, investors, coaches, consultants, and entrepreneurs. And now, here's your host, Brett Riggins. Today's guest is a Sacramento native, the founder and CEO of Big Trees MD. It's a direct primary care clinic in rural Northern California. She's a graduate of UC Davis and Creighton University. Today's guest is also the host of an amazing podcast called My DPC Story. Yes, we're going to talk about direct primary care, the entrepreneurial perspective of it, the real estate investor perspective of it, what it takes to go from where you're at to where you want to be. It's all in this conversation. We're going to dig down into it today. Everybody, please welcome Dr. Maryal Concepcion to the show. Well, we finally have made it through the changing times of bookings and schedulings and links and calendars. Here we are, Maryal. How are you?
I'm doing well, Brett. How are you doing today?
I'm doing wonderful as well, too. And it's Maryal, right? Maryal.
It is. People think that it's a unique name, but I'm Filipino, and it's very common to have Mary because of the Catholicism background of our culture in general, and then plus the dad's name. So my mom's is Mary, my dad's is Al.
Oh, Maryal. That's wonderful. That's so amazing. And from I guess from the outside, I just try to make it way more difficult than it is. Like I'm trying to read into it and read these different things. It's just Mary and Al. Well, welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here and talk with you more about your journey and the beautiful community that you've built, reaching into others' experience to now help and give back to more listeners on the show here. So, Maryal, tell us a little bit about your journey. And it is a medical journey, right?
It is, yeah. I am a family physician by training, specifically a rural family physician who still practices full scope medicine in terms of I do prenatal care. I do not do deliveries. I used to do colonoscopies. I stopped because of corporate medicine making me stop. And also I am able to take care of people, from cradle to grave, as well as do procedures because of the training that I was so fortunate to have in rural Nebraska. I was a person who went to medical school, went to residency, and then was an employed physician for a little bit shy of 6 years. When my employer basically presented myself and my husband, who is also a fellow family physician, a contract that basically said, people are cattle, you need to go faster, see more people per hour. And that was untenable for me. And so I made the decision to leave corporate medicine and go into my own clinic through the direct primary care model. And for listeners, if they're not familiar with the direct primary care model, what I like to say is it's old school medicine. So if your grandparent was able to call their doctor in their neighborhood, their doctor would already know them. They wouldn't have to, find their chart, find history on them. They would know that they would already have a connection, a relationship. And on top of that, now because we're in 2024 recording this, you have technology. So my patients are able to access me through a membership subscription. And that enables me to take a smaller panel of patients, to have a really good relationship with them, and to be accessible. And I am so excited that there are so many physicians, primary as well as specialty care physicians, who are choosing this model of care, direct primary care as a business model, because it is really hearkening back to why we went to medical school. And so, I am so excited to be here, just sharing a little part of my, knowledge and journey in being a business owner when it comes to real estate, especially because this is something that my community faces as one of the decisions in becoming a solopreneur.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. In this journey, first of all, congratulations with your journey up to this point, and getting back to that main reason why, connecting with the patient. And I'm not a physician, but I do hear this a lot. I do have the opportunity to talk about this a lot. The direct primary care approach, and I love how it relates to being that entrepreneur mindset, like similar to being an investor in real estate, how these things are linked together. Obviously, this does come into the real estate world when we talk about having your own business and where am I going to have this business at. But before we got there, I heard an interesting thing, two interesting things. One, the direct primary care, it almost sounded like it had gone away. And now you say, is it coming back?
Yeah. So that's a great thing to pick up on. I think what I like to point out is that just like anything, there's a pendulum effect to lots of things in our lives and our experiences as human beings. In healthcare, it's no different. So we used to have this model where there were really no specialties in existence. It was, you have your GP, you have your family doctor, and they can do things from delivering at home to surgery if needed. And then that changed when, HMOs came into play, and doctors who were in private practice were sold the story of, why do you have to bill the insurance? We'll just do that for you, and we can make it easier for you, and you can make more money while you're continuing your practice because you don't have to deal with the issues with billing and insurance. And so as the culture changed, the healthcare in this country has very much gone towards medicine as a corporate business, medicine as a business where private equity can come into the relationship that should solely exist between a doctor and their patient. And so now we see the DBC movement in particular growing like wildfire. And that's why I mentioned that it is a business model, because specialty doctors, cardiologists, gastroenterologists, dermatologists, even surgical specialists are choosing to no longer take insurance. And what they're finding is that they're better doctors in terms of their quality of care is better, and they know their patients. And so again, it goes back to the things we wrote about when we applied to medical school.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And you mentioned HMO to me, and I guess, again, being from the outside looking in, I know that this is a challenge. And you talk about the insurance and then the corporate piece, the investors who come in and buy and consolidate and make this a corporate approach, which injects then them into your relationship with the patient. And as a patient, without insurance, being self-employed, being an investor, like I don't have any of that background. So it's always this journey to see how awkward it can be on both sides when in the world of insurance is layered into there. But you going down and getting back into this world of direct primary care, being that entrepreneur, and there's so many things that we can talk about. What I want to chat about here today is the real estate side of it. Yeah. And that idea of, okay, now I've got to have a place to practice. I'm going to start my own practice. Tell me a little bit about your journey of how you stumbled through that, from the idea of, hey, I'm leaving this other place and I'm going to get my own business. Where did you start? What did you start looking at? What were some of the things that you struggled with? How could we help others who may be considering that DBC path right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one, just being a physician who has been in practice for over 3 years now, that just provides a layer of relatability to other fellow physicians. And that's why I think so many people listen to the podcast that I host, because of not only is how I stumbled through, my journey to having a physical space that we own now, important, but also it's relatable because I come from the same knowledge base as physicians who don't have an MBA and who don't have a real estate license. Some do, but most people do not have those things. And so for me, I definitely listen to the people who've gone before me. I got legal. I got a lawyer. That legal piece really nailed in before I started looking for real estate. And I knew that in general, the recommendation in starting your own practice is trying to keep your overhead low, because not having an MBA, you're still learning, like, what is a business plan? What is a profit and loss statement? And the idea of, if you can keep your, the dollars that you're investing in your clinic as low as possible, it can allow you to be nimble as expenses come along. And so for me, I opened as a home visit telemedicine model only. I did not have a space when I opened for about the first year, maybe year and a couple months. And then my practice grew to the point where I could sustain rent. I was paying about $12.90 in rural Northern California a month for my rent. And I was at a place where I was on a very short lease. And then about maybe 2 years in, an opportunity came up. A dentist closed his office literally 2 minutes from our house, and we purchased that building, my husband and I. And so along that journey, I was very grateful to have my lawyer, because I, before the space I ended up renting, was looking at it's a strip mall in town. It's a very small town, about 4,000 people, live here, full time. And the people who had owned the marketplace during the pandemic sold it to a corporation. It was, an opportune time for them. I get it. But unfortunately, when you have people who are corporate and who are not local and who do not have investments locally in terms of investments in the community, the culture changes. And so I was dealing with a negotiation that cost about $5,000 to have my lawyer negotiate a contract that ended in me not taking the space, because at the very tail end of the contract negotiations, the corporate Bay Area corporation basically said, if earthquake damage happens to the building, you're responsible for it, and you're responsible for the damage done to your space. And so when I think about, as a DPC physician, it's so important for me to help advocate for my patients as they go through our healthcare system. And I have the time to do that. It made me very aware of what I did not know as a physician who does not have a real estate background, the importance of having someone who could help you with the legalities of especially even a lease negotiation, because I think it would have cost me much more had I not known what I was doing, got into this 5-year lease. And then, we've had earthquakes happen at 4,000, we're at 4,000 feet here in Arnold, California. And I can't imagine what that would have cost had I signed a lease without being really aware or made to be aware of what are the pitfalls of just going into this, with a Pollyanna attitude of like, I am so excited to open my clinic. I'm excited to deliver quality care. Yes, I'll just sign this lease. It's 5 years, not much of a long-term lease. And talking to other physicians again really helped me see that that was definitely not the ideal way to go. And also having my lawyer. When I went into my space that I did rent, it was a mom and pop, situation, very much run and owned by local people. And I said specifically to them, I would like as short of a lease term as possible. And I was able to get a 6-month lease. And then after that, unfortunately for them, I guess they did not renegotiate with me. They had presented, we'd like to start talking about renegotiations. And I was just on a month-to-month lease when this building that we purchased came to market. And at the time, commercial real estate, especially, still now, it's not what people are really wanting to buy as much as homes where people can live. And in our area, the commercial real estate is definitely it's less attractive still. Our building was, I think, valued at over 400,000. And so my cousin, who is a real estate agent in Canada, sat us down and talked to us about, okay, now you're not talking about leasing, you're talking about leasing versus purchasing. And there it was really important to hear about what is good debt versus what is bad debt. It was really important to hear her say, if you are paying $1,290 a month and you took out a mortgage on this building, the mortgage would be less than what you're paying for your rental space. So you're literally putting flame to your money every month by investing in a lease that you are paying more for versus if you just bought your own building. And we intend to stay in this area, at least for a good amount of time. And so it made more sense to purchase the building outright.
Very interesting. You talked about good debt versus bad debt and the lease versus rent scenario. Had you ever considered investing in real estate prior to having this conversation with your cousin? It was your cousin, right?
Yeah, it's my cousin. And the answer is no. I do not come from a family of investors. My dad was a social worker. He had his master's in social work and worked for Valley Mountain Regional Center in the state of California, and my mom worked for the state of California. So there was no real estate bone in my body to even understand anything other than I don't ever want to be in debt. And so that was what was keeping me from even looking at the idea of purchasing initially, as well as the idea of being locked into even a 5-year lease. That duration of time, even though it's technically short, like 5 years flies by, it was still really intimidating for me to think 5 years from now, am I even going to be in business, knowing how small businesses fare in terms of how many succeed after the first 3 years, after the first 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. And when you say good debt, bad debt, tell me a little bit about what that means to you.
Yeah. So, when I was speaking with my husband and my cousin about this, the idea of, investing in something, in this case, property, where the equity in it is an investment. And yes, you are, putting money into it. So that was the good debt versus the bad debt being, here's this $1,290 that you're literally putting into a space that you have no ownership over. And to do a build out there would cost more money in a space that you would not necessarily need to or want to stay in as you grow, versus having a building that money was sunk into this building, but it also allows us to, think about, if we want to sublease, great, we can sublease. If we want to, as a small business in rural America, being a woman-owned, Filipino-owned business, apply for grants to help with, community build-out space or whatnot to provide services for the community. I don't have to go through layers of administration to be able to make my investment do more for this community. And as a DPC physician, being very burned out by 16 steps of administration committees telling me what I needed to do as a doctor for my patients, it's like, I'm sorry, who went to medical school? So I love the autonomy that ownership of a building provides, just like I do autonomy in my practice.
Mm-hmm. From the investor perspective, the good debt versus bad debt thing, and I was kind of digging at that a little bit. Have you ever read Robert Kiyosaki's book?
So can you say the title?
Yeah, it's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yes. So I actually have
several books.
I actually have, and that's what was the tipping point for my husband, who is a bigger naysayer for investing, to really listen to my cousin. We were there in Canada. We flew for a family trip over there, but I was listening to, I remember very vividly, I was listening to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, also just being from the Asian background, like that is, my entire, the people who are Filipino, who are Asian that I grew up with, who I consider close friends or family, I do not have anybody really exposed to real estate. And so when I was listening to that, I did not know that terminology of like good a good debt versus bad debt until I had listened to that book.
Yeah. And in there, a kind of a simple way of looking at it too is asset versus liability. And the easiest way to look at it is a liability takes money out of your pocket, and an asset puts money into your pocket.
Yeah.
So when you think about it, you have a loan to buy real estate. So all of a sudden, boom, your radar goes off with, hey, that's debt. Hey, I've got to pay this. Am I going to be able to pay it? But the idea of it being good debt, becoming an asset, is because it's creating money. It's putting money in your pocket. Although it is your business that's leasing the space, it is creating that cash flow and putting money in your pocket. So the asset versus liability, good debt versus bad debt. Another way to look at it too is good debt is a way that creates that income. And for me, in my experience as a business owner or entrepreneur, whenever I created debt that wasn't tied to a specific asset, that wasn't creating, those were always the nerve-wracking, troublesome times in my career. You said that your husband is a naysayer. What is his profession, if you don't mind my asking?
So he's a fellow family physician as well.
Okay. So you've got two docs, and a lot of times I see this docs are married to docs, and it's given because of the amount of time that you spend, getting to where you're going, and you're surrounded by that. So the other thing we look at too is the way that we're conditioned to feel about money and how that affects our ability to be an entrepreneur or an investor based on, hey, either it's a no debt, I can't go into debt, or money is way too hard to come by to take a risk and put it into something like this, or I have to work hard, I actually have to use my hands to make money. So all of these things, these are mental blocks that keep us from investing in real estate, along with the first thing that I heard you say was you don't really have anybody around you in your family that's invested in real estate. So you have not surrounded yourself, or just not had the experience around yourself with those kind of people. I'm the same way, Maryal. I didn't grow up. My family still doesn't do real estate. So it was just the whole debt thing was just a challenge, but it can be overcome. The first thing to self-development is self-realization in those moments where you said you listened to the book, and it's just a great book. And I think it's a platform that a lot of people take off from is Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And there are several other books that he has written as well, too, that help you elevate from that point forward. The next one is a great one, Cash Flow Quadrant. And your understanding as a business owner, DPC, and a property owner, how can I not be a technician anymore? And right, how can I build these things so I can do this? But the challenge we have is not taking it to a point where you're this corporate thing, right? Yes. So there's the balance in between the two, and it all comes down to our why. As long as we are feeding our why and aligns with what we're set out to do, we can find this place where we don't have to reach the HMO world, the insurance world, the corporate world, to find that piece of happiness. What was one thing that you would suggest to the listeners who maybe have the same type of thing going around them, whether it's family, friends, or whatever, the naysayers, and they want to go out and find their business? Let me preface that a little further. They've done the I call sniper shots. They've done the over the phone. Maybe they've leased a single room, and they're ready to go out now and find their spot, whether it's leasing or buying. What would you suggest to them? And they've got these naysayers in their ears too.
Yeah, I definitely would say, I think there is value in hearing the naysayers, because you can prove from those naysayers' points what is a myth and what is actually a fear that can be overcome in entrepreneurship and autonomy. I also think that reaching out to people who have, done bigger things compared to like wherever a person is, like if a person is going from never having had a space to negotiating a lease, talk to someone who's negotiated a lease. If you're talking to someone who has already gone through renegotiating a lease, talk to them about, what they learned, lessons learned from their experience. And I also think that it is definitely a mindset. There is a mindset portion to this, to say to yourself, especially in medicine, especially in primary care, if you can go to medical school, you could probably learn a bit about real estate and investing. We have a very large, presence of imposter syndrome when it comes to physicians. I would definitely say female physicians, especially. And when it comes to looking at the future, that's something that a lot of employed physicians do not do because they're so focused on just surviving and they're not focused on what do I do after? And when you become an entrepreneur, especially as a DPC doctor, you get to find your path in the world that allows medicine to be balanced with your family time, and also it allows you to be balanced with your, hobbies. And for a lot of people, they find that freedom in entrepreneurship so amazing and so different. And sometimes people are like, oh my gosh, what do I do with myself? And when it comes to especially, stepping away from a job where you might not have a 401k matched by your employer anymore, or you might not have health insurance, you can still survive and you can still be profitable. But telling yourself that that is even possible, I think, again, this goes back to knowing that other physicians are out there being physician entrepreneurs and parents and real estate owners all at the same time and being happier because of it.
Mm-hmm. When did you buy your building?
Yep. So we actually closed January of 2024.
Nice.
So it's January 12th is when we closed. I remember that because it was so recent.
Yeah. So in this first year, I want to tell you something about this, a very interesting thing inside the tax code. And again, I'm not a certified public accountant. I'm not a tax attorney, but listen to this. There's something called the aggregation election. And have you heard of that?
So my husband is definitely, he's because now we own this building, he has been the person to be finding out the ways that we can benefit from this investment and this asset. So I believe he has mentioned that. I am not too familiar with it. He's also mentioned, rent. So we created a company, and so we rent to ourselves now, as one of the strategies to benefit from owning this asset.
Yep. So just kind of throw these things out there for you. There's the passive income and passive losses versus active income and active losses. In the world where we can be a real estate professional status, I can actually use passive losses to offset my active income. So that business income that you have is likely an active income, but the depreciation that we have from the building is passive. So it's how do I take this passive losses and offset my active income? This aggregation election is perfect for this particular scenario for DPCs, especially.
Awesome.
So you can leverage this aggregation election with the right consultants and CPAs and all of that stuff. What it allows you to do is take advantage of the benefits of being a real estate professional without having to log 750 hours and do all of this. With this election, you can actually run things like cost segregation to maximize the depreciation on this building and offset your active income faster. So it's a beautiful, wonderful thing that I've learned. I'm a real estate professional. I live, eat, breathe, sleep real estate. So that's something I have to buy. When I speak with physicians, this is a great way because how many direct primary care physicians acquire properties, right? Yeah. So I think it's just a great way. It's awesome that your husband has heard about that, and definitely reach into that and keep pushing, keep finding those ways to keep more of the money that you make.
Yeah, absolutely.
My father-in-law was in the grocery business, and he's a mentor of mine. He had a couple of stores, and he would always tell me, certain things about business. Not getting too spread out. Don't do more than one house at a time. All these things. But one of the things I always remember is he always said it's easy to make money. It's harder to keep money. Yeah. So, and that idea is you can go out and make this money, but it's hard to keep it, whether it's not only expenses, but tax expense, interest expense, all of these things that take that away from you. So the more that we can learn and share together on these ways of keeping more of the money we make is really important, because then in turn, that's a happier doctor, that's a closer patient relationship, all of these things work, and then more intentional giving back as well too.
Absolutely.
So, I
Yeah.
absolutely love those ideas. Where are you headed now, Maryal, in your real estate investing world? Like, where I know you're focused on DPC right now, but where? Tell me a little bit about what you and your potentially your husband's perspective is of now. This is good debt. This is bad debt. Where does that
Yeah.
take us?
So I definitely would say that the mindset has shifted in terms of, one on our property, but also possibilities in the future. We talk about, where would we like to settle if we're retired and we're older, where would we like to settle? What about looking at properties there? And also looking at, ways to, when I go back to our space, ways to make our space make income by, like I mentioned, subleasing and building out space to have other streams of income from that space. One of the things that I was very, very grateful for was to be able to live above the clinic where I worked in rural Superior, Nebraska, during medical school and after during residency, during my rotations out there. And the idea of, it is so hard to find physicians to come to rural America. And if I can participate in, how I was mentored in that, next generation, exposure to what rural medicine is and how wonderful it can be, especially if you, love living in a close knit community, if you love being a full scope physician, if you love, being able to have, your patients appreciate you, just because you're a doctor who stays in rural America. Those are the things that we are looking at to try to, I guess, steer where we're going with investing in our own property that we have now. When we talk about the patients themselves, I mean, I have a patient who just yesterday, she said, I need your business to make money so that you don't leave because I don't know what I'm going to do without my doctor. And
Yeah.
that's, a very dire example, but it really paints how there is a relationship that I have with my patients and they value that. And this is a patient I had in my fee for service practice, and they never mentioned things like that because, I take much better care of my patients now. And so, this idea that we have more time to think about how are we going to look at real estate and investing in particular, we never had that time before.
Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Well, the best wishes that I could ever put out and good energy for you and your husband, it's going out, and you're going to be in our thoughts absolutely because it's so important when you tie your why into your investing, your why into
Yeah.
your career, and you're able to keep pushing on that, and then all of a sudden it feels like you'll be lifted up from others around you because you're true to your values, and I
Yeah.
really appreciate that.
Yeah.
And what else I appreciate is you coming on the show today, Maryal. That's absolutely wonderful. What is the name of your podcast?
Yeah, so it's definitely my pleasure to be here. My podcast is My DPC Story, so DPC for Direct Primary Care. And it's not my story, it is the weekly stories of physicians who are like me, who have chosen direct primary care. And they definitely talk about, their own why, but also, the struggles to being an entrepreneur and a physician and parent and, all of these things, what business tools they use, what they've found to help them be successful, and how they overcame challenges. And so, it is literally one of my joys in life. It absolutely speaks to my why because I could hear, an infinite amount of fellow physician stories who've chosen this way of care because every single person I have talked to, it just like you get on your podcast, like everyone's story is different. But when you hear a story that you can relate to, it's just, I get so excited every time I'm able to interview a guest.
That's amazing. That's My DPC Story. And if you put the .com on there, you can actually find the guests, the shows, and everything. mydpcstory.com. And if the listeners wanted to join your podcast, I'm sure they can reach out to you and connect with you there, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Just on our mydbcstory.com, like you said, on the contact page, there's a apply to be a guest, and it's all right there. And yeah, all of our socials are the social handle is at mydbcstory.
Beautiful, beautiful. And I actually see some of your guests that we've actually had on our show as well, too. That's fun. So amazing. Awesome. Well, you keep it up. You're doing wonderful. Keep stretching, removing these limiting beliefs that we all have, not our fault. It's our conditioning through our family, through our experiences, but they are blessing in disguise because we can take those and just pivot one little bit. And then as we grow and pivot, we can then share and give building blocks to others along the way. So thank you again for your time today, Maryal. Really appreciate it. And to the listeners out there, again, thank you for your time and your attention. And you heard it here. The DPC story is the way. I'm so excited to be able to share these types of stories and learn. Each time that we share, we learn a little bit about the process coming out of the gate. What am I supposed to do? How am I looking at real estate? How do I expand my associations to learn from others who've already been through this? I say it all the time. If you're going through a process, if you want to go through a process, reach out to people who have done it successfully already. That's how you're going to mitigate. It's not going to mitigate everything, but it's going to mitigate some of the risk, the stress, the tears, and the fears that you have to obtain that growth in your life. And that growth in your life is really important because it's taking you one step closer to being the person that you are designed to be. This is Real Estate Mogul MD.